A very good morning, folks. So what I'm trying to do today is to give you an elaborate view on what MongoDB is all about and its various capabilities. We're going to look into some of its tools, and we will also discuss some of the interesting aspects that come with MongoDB. So as many of you would know, the MongoDB is a very popular product. Okay? So it's been around since 2007. That's a pretty long time if you think about it. And slowly it is becoming data as a service. It is a multimodal database. It started and it still is basing itself as a document database, but it's sort of enriching the products that it has to tailor for various application developers so that it suits their needs. If you look at all the NoSQL databases in terms of innovation and feature-rich sets, I think MongoDB obviously ranks first, and that should explain why MongoDB was able to capture 40% of the database market in the last 2 years. The numbers look startling given that there are so many new players, but we will talk about the business model and what MongoDB is doing right and will it sustain the way, all these discussions along with the demo. So if you look into the products, MongoDB is trying to sell itself into various aspects. MongoDB originally started as a commercial server. Very soon it realized that if it had to establish itself and get developers love, it has to start looking at community entities. So very quickly after it was incepted, they came up with a community edition. Until date, you can see that there are 2 versions that are available. So if somebody wants to try MongoDB for the first time, it's very common that they go to the community edition and then they install it. Realm, on the other hand, is an extension that happened in MongoDB when the internet applications started. So there were a lot of innovations around it. It is still going to be the default when you're talking about going into newer architecture like serverless architecture using functions and so on and so forth. The whole idea of Realm is to be able to make MongoDB communicate to any kind of edge devices via cloud resources. But once into the journey, I think very likely when they had a new CEO, the latest CEO that we have for MongoDB in the last 5-6 years, MongoDB has realized the importance of cloud and how it has to partner well with all the prominent cloud players. So you can see that they came up with this product specially called Atlas, and Atlas is basically trying to be the multi-cloud platform for databases. So the moment you want to set up a cloud-based database and then connect it via any of your cloud computing services, Atlas is the very all-encompassing multi-cloud tool that they have launched. So they're looking into 3 divisions in this. A highly transactional system is supposed to be a database in Atlas. The searches and indexes, which they were originally partnering with the Elastic tech stack, they're now trying to, every company tries to become a bit more reliant on its core, self-reliant on its core products. So needless to say, Atlas has reinvented the way the indexes and searches work on MongoDB, and they have become part of a key search facility. It also extends itself to inert data sets, raw data sets that are quite large in size, and there's a necessity for you to deal with raw files and exchanges. So Data Lake is their product. So these are the 3 main data products on the cloud. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Community Server for starters. Of course, you can use both tools to interact with Mongo. One is Compass. Compass is a graphical UI. Shell is a command line shell. You're also allowed to use code plugins. So you can see that you can use it in Visual Code, which is the free IDE from .NET. You can also use a command line tool from Atlas. You can also use various data connectors. As I would have already mentioned during the classes, MongoDB seems to be supporting more than 32 programming languages. That makes it quite interesting. So it becomes an easy choice for databases in terms of connector compatibility. So these are some things that Mongo has done right. So without much talk now, let me get into the Compass tool so that I can show you how a local cluster works. So one thing that you need to install when you want to download and work with the Mongo database is the community server, and you need a tool There are two styles of doing it. Okay, so what you can do is, mine is a Windows machine, so I'm going to look for MongoDB download URL. So you can see that it gets me to the community download by default. And in the community download, I can pick up whatever operating system I'm trying to look for, and the latest version is 506. Because my machine is a Windows, I picked the liberty of choosing Microsoft installer. Of course, if you're using a different operating system, you'll be using different tools for it. So once I've downloaded it, what is the beauty of it is it comes inbuilt with the Compass tool. Okay? So there is this community edition server. There is a plugin for Atlas services if we need to use, and it also comes with basic tools for productivity, which is Compass. It also has an internal shell. If you're not very happy with it, you can go back and download a separate MongoDB shell as a standalone product. So you can see that in the tools, there I've got some. Okay. So if you go into the tools download, you'll be able to find out DB shell. Okay. So you can also use this to do your shell as a standalone without having the need to use Compass. Compass is the default UI. I don't have to separately install it because it comes with the community server edition. So once you finish installation and you open up Compass, it's going to roughly look like this. Okay. And you can see that there are some past trials that I've given. Okay. So I think I started using it ever since the pandemic hit us. I didn't do many Iadd runs, as you can guess. So there are a few connections that I've connected here. So what you can do is you can connect to the local database by accepting the default string. And then, of course, you can see that there are many kind of databases that are currently available. So if you would like to create a new database, you just click on the new create database. You can give a collection name. So I'm just going to call this as demo. Okay? And I'm going to call this collection name as, say, data sets. Okay? And I want it to be a cap collection so that I don't have to use too much size. Okay? So maybe I will use some 8,000 megabytes. Okay? So I just use a create database. Okay? So that creates a demo database for me. So once I go in, you can see that there are a lot of storage details. Okay? So the storage size is quite small, as you can see. And of course, you can create a collection inside this. Okay? So I'm going to call this as, say, a very simple collection, right? So I'm not very interested in creating big data sets that may not be so useful. Okay? So what I would probably try to do is create a very simple file and show you how it works. Okay? So I'm going to call this as, there is a item collection that I want. Okay? So I'll just create a collection. Then I'll create another collection called pets. Okay? So I'll just create it as a non-capped one. Okay? So if I go into item, I want to add data. Okay? Alternatively, what I can do is I can import data. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder, maybe a test folder somewhere. Okay? So let me take my teach box, IDD. Okay, so here is where I'm going to create some data sets. So I'm going to call this as 03 data sets. And inside the data set, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a very simple JSON file. So the first thing I need is a command prompt. Okay. Then the next thing I would need is a file. Okay. So I'm going to say, of course, touch won't work. So I'll just pipeline it to pets.json. Okay. I'll just put something inside first, and then, of course, you can see that I can change this. So if I look at the file set, it's pets.json. So I'm going to take this. Initially, I put some directory commands inside. I'm going to create a very simple set of JSON. So this is again a sample database from the. So what I can do is, now I have a pets, right? So I can drag and drop this, or I can select the file. So if you remember, I went into the teach box, IDD, datasets, and pets JSON. So I just want to open that. It's a JSON file. Okay? So I'll just say import, and then you can see all the 3 records are here. Okay? So that's interesting. Now if I want to start working with that, of course I can do it in the command line as well. Okay, so I can simply say Mongo import and then give a database name and then point it to the file. That also happens. So now I will find out what DB is currently being used. Okay, so it's test. Okay, so I'm going to say use demo. So that's my default database that I want. Okay. So I'm going to say DB. So I'll see what DB is connected, demo database. So I'll say DB dot, I call this as, oh, I put that inside items, which is wrong. Okay. So let's just delete the records, delete it, delete it, delete it, delete it. I wanted this inside pets. So I'm going to say import data, select the file, select pets file, import, done. Okay, so it's in the right collection. So I'm going to call this as I hope you're watching the here. Okay, so I'll just say find, and you will see that it gets me all the data. Okay. So if I want to filter it, so if I want to filter, say I want to find out any ID with particular name. Okay. So I can do that by using a very simple query set. Or if I want to check for some ID and a value, what I can do is I can use that as a filter and see if it works. So I can give a field value which is 1 and then see if it filters. Okay, so I'll say find. So you can see it gets me the record. So it's not necessary it should be by ID. I can even put it by name. And this time name, I want to find out whichever name has so it's a cat this time. So when I say find, you can see that it picks up the record. It's a very simple way to create databases. And of course, JSON, CSV, all of these are very friendly to be created on the command. And if you think about how the command shell is going to help you, I'll see if I can increase the font size so that it's readable. Unfortunately, no. Okay. I'll see if I have a zoom button or something. Oh no. Okay. So never mind. I think our so I can simply go and find out what is my import version. So I can simply say import, or I can say what version is being used for importing. So it gets me the tool number. Okay. So did I do something wrong? Mongo import. Okay, yeah, semicolon is missing. So let's see. Oh no. Anyway, I'll be able to find out all the tools. The beauty of this particular tool is it also helps me to create any value. So I can simply say x is equal to 200. Then I can say x slash 2. So it prints me the answer. Okay? So then, of course, I can also look for maths.py, or I think maths.py. So there are a lot of values that I can use, and it's by itself trying to help me with a lot of functionality. I can create a date, I can assign date, a lot of interesting things can be done. Now if I go back to my data sets, and if I am supposed to deal with them, so I go to items this time. I can simply say add data, import document, and here is where I can simply import a simple item document. So in this case, I want to again pick up another document and then insert inside, see if it works. So there's something wrong. Okay, so maybe I should delete everything. Okay, and then put it, and then say insert. It contains error. So there are some errors here. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe I will just insert one row at a time and see if it goes through. So there is an insert here. Okay, so it goes through. So what I can do is I can simply import insert a collection, right? And then here is where I can put in all the additional ones. Right? So if I have to do it, I usually do it one by one, as I mentioned here. If I want to have multiple, I can simply say multiple insert or document insert and then put all of them inside. And if you notice, I was only giving item, quantity and things, and then you see Mongo added another key and value pair. It started with _ID. So that's a unique way in which MongoDB identifies primary key. So this also holds good for the first data set, but what I have done is I've already created my own primary key. So that's why it took that as the primary key. But in this items demo, I did not give a primary key. So you can see that it picked up its own system generator. So this is pretty much what we have on the local data set. You can look at existing schema being shared as a JSON if you want. You can look at many other ways in which you can look at the data set. So if you look at pets, you can look at the schema structure. You can look at the indexes that are primarily created. You can look at any kind of validation rules that you want to set inside the database. So there are plenty of things that you can play around with inside, and you can create further databases and all that. At any point on time you want to have a newer connection, you can simply say new connection, and this will start another instance of campus. What I'm going to do is I have a very simple data set that I can use, which is available from MongoDB. So I'm going to paste that connection string here, which is the open data set that anyone can use. So I'm going to connect that to show you that it is possible for you to connect to a MongoDB in the cloud just using the compass. So you can see that there are plenty of data sets that is already connected here. So the data set comes in 3 shards. It's a replica set. Okay. And then you can see that there are many other data sets here as well. So there is a cursor aggregation, there is a mflux data set, which is a movie data set. There are some video data sets that you can look at. Okay. So there are plenty of hosts, nodes, replica, and everything. And you can see that this sample database is an enterprise edition server that is running on the cloud. So you can see that it is running 4.2.19. So that's pretty much what we have here. You can also go in further and then start working on it. Okay, but I think I don't have full rights to go and alter this sample data set. What I can probably do is search for something. So I can simply say I want to look at the movies. So when I say movies database, it gets me to the movies database. And of course you can see that there are a lot of records, 44,488 records, of which the first 20 is being handed over to me. So if I want to find out a particular movie by a title, I can just use this title to search. So let me just copy this and then say you have a Beauty and the Beast. Okay. So that's the record I'm interested in. Can you filter by that and then show me all the records? Okay, so maybe title that says just the beauty. I'm not sure how the conjunctions are being pronounced. No results. So maybe I should put it inside the same line. I think I have syntax error here. Okay. Oh, nothing by beauty. That's interesting. Okay. Anything by beast? No, nothing. So let me just remove all the filters and say find data. Okay. So there are some movies. It says maybe Baby's Dinner. Okay, let's see. Very old movie. So that's an exact match, and I hope I should be able to find that. So let's try find. Yeah, so you get it. Yeah. So maybe it was not called Beauty and the Beast, and there's some typo that I'm trying to search. But anyway, this is the movie data set from Cargo. So that JSON is imported here and it's running inside the shard servers. So you can see that there are triple shards and then there are replica sets as we spoke about. So this is how you can basically deal with any local data set. You can work with the Mongo shell as I mentioned, or you can work with the compass, either way. And when you try to execute a query, you can look at execution trace. So this particular baby dinner, this is how it's going to look at. It's going to fetch certain indexes, it's going to filter on certain conditions, and it's going to give me a result. So if you want, you can look at the JSON execution of the query as well, or the visual tree execution. So this is very similar to the directed acyclic graph in the Spark world that we looked at. So it's the query execution part. And of course, it also helps you to take a look at the different kind of indices that are available and why certain searches are faster over the other. And is there any other validation triggers you want to put into the database? You're free to do that. So that's pretty much what I have to show you regarding a local cluster. So let's next move on to cloud database. For that, I particularly need an account. So I'm just checking whether the recorder is on. It seems to be on. So the next demo that I'm going to give is completely running the Mongodb on the cloud. So for this, I need a proper Atlas account to be set. So I'm going to use a dummy Gmail account I've just created to use that to log in into the Atlas and probably give you a demo. So I'm going to go and look for MongoDB Atlas. So you can see that it gets me into the Atlas website. So this is basically the MongoDB database on the Atlas front end. So if I want to try, I need to sign in. So I'm going to sign in to this particular account. So when I want to sign in, I have to use a credential set. So I can log in with Google account, and you can see that it allows me to use existing accounts. I'll use a new account that I've just created. So I'll call this as surya.iss.demo@gmail. So that's the account I want to use, and then there's a password that I like to use. So I'm going to use that to sign in. And as you can very clearly see that the moment you go into the account, it is asking you for privacy class. I have never ever learned the terms and condition in my life, so I'm just going to accept it blindly. Okay, so when I say submit, it is accepted. And that it gets me into the Atlas. Okay, so this is the cloud database. Okay, so let's see, it says it's successfully done. So it takes a minute or two to set up the dashboard for me. So it usually asks me what I'm trying to do. So my goal is to learn MongoDB, and I want to explore what I can build and what kind of applications that I'm thinking about. Maybe real-time analytics. What is my preferred language? I like Scala, but maybe I should just go with Java, which is for starters. So I'll just say finish. So you can see that it sort of helps me to pick. I can start trying all these dedicated servers and things like that, but you see I'm only trying to do a demo, so I'm going to go with a basic cluster. I don't need any credit card information for this because it allows me to explore data sets, and that's pretty much what I want to try here. So I'll say create. So that creates a shared cluster. You can see the default it goes into is AWS because AWS is a free tier. It picks up Singapore based on my IP address. So these things are nice. I'll just say create a cluster. It creates one. Doesn't last very long, but is good enough for me to start. So I can create usernames and passwords. And so I can simply say Surya, and I can create a password that is so I can create a user. So that's enough, and I want to use the cloud environment. I can select that, or if I want to use my local environment, I can simply select that. I can say current IP address, okay? And then that's my IP address, finish and close. So go to the database view. You can update password if you want, but I'm okay. So you can see that it takes a minute or two. Okay? So it takes connection details, and then it connects to the IP address, and then it loads the sample data. Okay? So you can say that load the sample data, and then of course you can see that it connects me, it gives you a connection to the cluster. Because I said that I had to use Mongo database to learn the cluster or learn the facilities, it understands that I'm going to do some trials and errors, and by default it allows me to connect to the sample data set sandbox. Okay. So you can see that it is giving me a default sandbox with very similar 3 replica nodes that is usual. So you can see that it takes a minute or two to create this free cluster, and of course you can see after a few hours this cluster is garbage collected, or I can even release this. Okay. So it takes the first server, second server, and everything. And as I mentioned earlier, you have the realm whereby you can do a lot of profiling and performance monitoring for your cloud database. And charts is basically going to allow you to do performance monitoring for your Mongo database. Okay, so these are some facilities that come inbuilt, and it's quite easy to take a look at them. So let's give it a minute or two for that to be able to set it up. So not bad, the cluster has started. If you want to look at the monitoring dashboard, you can say view monitoring, and if you want to start looking at data sets, you can do so. Here I'm choosing the sample data set, so I'm going to say please use the sample data set. So that's around 350 MB. I'm fine with that. I'm just saying please load the data set for me. Okay. So there are a lot of friendly data sets that I was just now talking about comes here into play. So you can take a look at them, and you can see how it is getting into the cloud and how one could use it. So it sort of loads the dataset, and then it is ready for you to start working with. Once you have a collection inside, which is basically the dataset, you'll be able to browse the collection. You'll be able to look at the status on how the database is working. Actually, you can do a lot of interesting things using this Atlas dashboard. So Atlas is basically a very cloud-friendly and complete data set that allows for health checks and all that. So if I want to browse my collection, I can simply click on browse the collection. So that allows me to look at all the different data sets that are available, the different indexes, and so on and so forth. Alternatively, what I can do is I can also go and look into metrics and look at what is being monitored at the moment. I can start having my own dashboards, which is customized. This is the default dashboard that comes in. So I can look at how many requests comes in per second, how many is being serviced, what happened in the last 1 hour, 4 days, 5 days. So there's a lot of aggregators, and the whole set of profiling is quite interesting on the Atlas monitoring system. So if you go back to the collection, by now I think you should be able to retrieve the list of collections. Just give it a minute or two. You also have a profiler where you basically talk about how many so you have to upgrade it to a higher cluster, but there's a very professional inbuilt diagnoser tool that helps you to deal with how your database is working, what's the CPU utility, how is your RAM performing, and it also gives you some suggestions, how you can improve the performance and all that. So I'm just going to go back to my simple collection list so that I'll be able to show you some data set that is existing and it is loaded. The cluster system has a health check at any point on time. It keeps telling me how my cluster is working. So here you can see that it is all good. Okay. So give it a time or two. Then because I selected real time, it also allows me to watch the data sets in real time. So that's the real time dashboard if you're interested in seeing. And of course, it tells me how many commands. I think I have provided some of these screenshots inside the slides, so you should be able to visualize them. Here, I do not want to upgrade just because I don't want to pay. So you can see that there's some simple data set here. Okay, so that's the MFlix data set. There's a lot of data records inside this MFlix, and of course there's also some training data set where I can run some machine learning analytics and real-time analytics. Because I have put in for real-time analytics, it was sensible to pick up those kind of analytics data sets for me. So here I have a collection called comments, and the comments has got around 41,079 records. So this is about different persons, users, and picking up a particular movie and writing comments about it. So this is basically archived from public database on the Netflix. So the MovieFlix comments is basically here. So again, I can go in and write filter conditions and then look at what data set is useful to me and so on and so forth. I can also look at all the different kind of indexes that are available on this particular comments data set, collections as they call it. And of course, there are also search indexes which helps me to make faster searches on these data sets. So this is a very simple way to import data sets. But if you want, you can play around by creating a new database. Okay? So it doesn't stop you from creating your own. So I can simply say I want to create a database here. I want to call this as say for example movies. I want the collection name, database is collection name is movie singular. I want it to be a capped collection. Maximum is 50,000 bytes, and I create it. So this is how I create a database called movies. Then I want to insert records into the collection name. So once it comes in, let me start trying to. Okay, so there's an unexpected error. So maybe it was too huge. I'll just create a very small database. I don't know how much is the free instance. So I'll call this as movies. I'll call the collection name also as movies. I'll put a cap collection, but I'll just say 5,000 bytes. Great. Okay, so this one worked because it's not as resource intensive as the other one, because it's a free cluster. I didn't know how much I was allocated. So this was the movies, and this was the movies table. Okay, so I can go to the command line tools. I can actually install the command line, or I can make a connection with my Mongodb shell. So you can connect with your Mongodb shell. So I'm going to use this. Username is Surya, so I'm going to use this, and then what I have to do is I have to start up I have to create a connection string. So what I got to do is I got to use this and then put all the rest of the commands all as key and value pairs, and then create a connection string. Okay. So I can rather use the command shell and see if I can connect it. So I can go back to my MongoDB campus and say new connection, and then see if the connection URL is okay. Otherwise I have to create one and show. This is only the download. So I have to create using this particular URL. Okay, so let me just create one in the notepad and then bring it up back here. So it is going to be MongoDB ://savi : movies at cluster :27017 I'll put in the cluster name as well. Okay, so I think I would rather use the MongoDB shell instead. So I'll go into the shell and see if I can. Username is Surya, but there's no my first database. There's only movies inside. Let's see. It's okay. I think. Okay, Mongo SH is not working. So I got to install the Mongo shell now. So I hope I have. Let me try. Mongo SH. Yeah, I don't have it installed. So I got to install the Mongo shell application first, and then of course I can use the connector and then go back and take a connection. So I think I won't waste time on that further. So let's this is how I get it connected if I have to use the command line tools. So if I go back to my collection, I'll be able to see the list of records here, and of course you can see that there are no current records available. I can create records, so I can simply use insert document and then go ahead and then insert the JSON files that I did. Right? So that is one way of doing. Alternative is to just import data sets. Okay? So what I can do is I can go into I hope there is this import command. Access manager is fine, but where do I import it? Okay, so I can I'll pick up the right command for you, so you'll be able to go in and then create or import data sets into it. So you can point out to the particular JSON file that you want to import, you will be able to import it. So you can see that there is already a lot of data sets. So you can see that there is review data sets from the Airbnb available for you to play around with. There are some training state supply data set that is available for you to play around with. There's also this climate data which involves JSON that we discussed. So there are some coordinates that it uses, and you can also try geoqueries if you want. So there are plenty of sample data sets, and then I'll point you to the right documentation in the workshop instruction, so you can go ahead and then play with all the different kind of queries that is working with this piece of cluster. What is new is this data API. This is really cool. It's been only it's the latest addition, and they have recently launched it. And what you can do is you can select all available data set in your cluster, and then you can make it into a data set. Okay? So I'm selecting and then I'm going to enable this as a data API. What happens is your data set gets exposed as REST API points that allows you to try to create a client, maybe a React client. Then you can directly consume it and see how it works. Okay? So that's the beauty of data API, and of course it has its own roles, it has its own security settings that we got to respect, and so on and so forth. But data API is really cool because by the moment you have created a data set, it is possible for you to expose this as a service. Of course, this one is a free cluster, so you can see that it gets you a very simple endpoint here, URL endpoint. You can use a Postman and then see how to insert data, and you can test this particular endpoint. You can also add in API keys, which sort of enhances your security, and all the contacts that are made with the API is diverted to a log, and you will be able to see what the log is capable of. Because this is a new service and they want to promote the data API, they are sort of giving it for free. Maybe down the line they would start charging it, but that's a real cool service, as you can see. So you can set up data access, you can set up who can access, which network can access, and then what are other kind of Active Directory LDAP authentication that is possible. So this is basically me trying to expose my Mongodb server as an endpoint. Okay. So that's pretty much what I have in the cloud. So maybe I should go back and look at my databases and see that I've been using some memory. So there's some cluster responses here. Okay. So it's a free database, and I'm done with all the simple trials that I wanted to show you on this cloud database. So I'm going to terminate this instance and enter the cluster name. So you got to give the cluster name as and then you terminate it. So you can see that the cluster is gone. The data set was completely shut down. The instance will be cleared. So once this is terminated, you can also remove this cluster if you do not want this instance to say. So this sandbox has been released and you're free from the resources. So this is simply how Mongo allows you to explore all the cloud services as a beginner, as a learner, without needing to pay via credit card and all that. So this is pretty good data set for you to start working with in the Mongo and learn about all the queries and so on and so forth. So I hope that gave you an outlook of how the local PZ installation will work and how the Cloud Atlas version works. So if you have any more questions, you can take a look at it and then post it to me. So if I'm able to answer you, I'll answer you. Otherwise, I'll point you to the right documentation that gives you the proper answer. So thank you very much for listening, and that's pretty much what I have for demo for the Mongo database.